And part of looking to change how the product development process works in Sakai, there's a desire to increase the degree of formality around what ends up in the release. And yet we want to maintain the open development nature of the Sakai community. And so in introducing the notion of a product council, their role is not so much as a group to tell the Sakai community what criteria need to be met before a project is ready for release, but rather to work with the community to have the community to develop criteria that the product council can enforce and inform and ensure are met before projects make it to the release. So in that way, I really see the product council as a guardian or as a steward of the desires of the community.
Now, one of the things you talked about was setting standards for the products as they were released. Can you talk about how that process is? I know some of it was what you talked about just now, but in terms of actual standards, how's that going to develop?
Yeah, in terms of developing the standards that the council will enforce, we already have some good work done in the community today. There's a scorecard that was developed as part of the Paris conference last year. There's criteria for provisional status from the existing Sakai development model that lay out different criteria in different categories, from technical criteria, user experience criteria, accessibility criteria, functional criteria that we'd like to see met before a product becomes part of the Sakai release. And I think the community will have lots of opinions about how things should happen, and one of the roles that I will play and the foundation will play as part of this is to ensure that the criteria that we have are effective, and that effectiveness has two forms. One is that they're the right criteria, that they're set a high enough bar so that we're confident when something meets them that it's ready for use in a large institutional setting, but also that there's something the community can execute on, that they're not so elaborate or complex that we can't really get something through the process. So I think a group organic process will have a tendency to produce something that may be overly complex. And so I think part of the role that we'll try to play is meeting the intentions behind a complex set of criteria, but trying to simplify them so those who are building products have something straightforward that they can work with to get into the Sakai release.
One more question, which is, I know one of the issues in the past has been how to get the community to contribute developer-type resources. How do you anticipate dealing with that?
Well, so as to the question of getting increased and increasingly effective community development, community contribution of resources, a lot of the reason this process is being created is to do just that. So there's a variety of institutions who feel that, I'll point to two things. One is there's a number of institutions that feel that with a better structured product development process, they would be more willing and more able to contribute resources to the project. The second thing is there's a lot of small things that happen that aren't collected together. And if they were collected together and brought together, there would be more resources working on things that actually got to the finish line, as opposed to stayed in an experimental stage.
Yeah, can you talk about that with some examples? I know, there's so many mail tools and there's so many different types of tools. So
yeah.
How would that?
So we have a profusion of not just tools that cover the same territory in terms of sending announcements or mail, but also tools that if you stepped back and abstracted what they were really trying to do, you would see that if you did a little bit of development of the abstraction layer, that each of those use cases could simply be a configuration of a more general capability rather than a tool in and of itself. And I really see strongly the role of the product manager, Clay Finlayson, as a staff member at the Sakai Foundation now, to identify those opportunities, work on helping the individual organizations that are working on these things see the abstraction and try to transcend the politics of getting organizations to work together. And I don't mean politics in a negative sense, but the sort of general resource availabilities and different ways of working that need to be brought together, by showing them the mutual benefit of having a single shared effort rather than multiple independent efforts.
Can I see one more?
Please.
The requirements group, as you know, kind of went away, and there's talk now of kind of regenerating something or trying to get that process going again. How do you see that working with Product Council, this new process?
So in terms of the requirements working group and the sort of dissolution of that a year or so ago, I was instrumental in that dissolution because I felt that after working through it myself, I felt that the effort of the people going through that process was producing a work product that did not have an impact on the Sakai release, and it was frustrating to those who were doing it, and it was frustrating to the people who were working on the Sakai release because they were being asked to do things they didn't have time to do, and couldn't say yes when they wanted to, and so that doesn't mean, though, that the community shouldn't have a way to express requirements into the product development process. And I don't know what the answer to that is going to be at this point in time. I expect Clay to facilitate that conversation, the Sakai product manager, and I know that during the conference there's a session on reconstituting the requirements development process, and I'm eager to see the results of that conversation. And so I guess I would point people to the citizen journalist interview of that session for an answer on how that might shape up.
All right. Anything else you want to say?
I'd just like to say that while this is an initiative that the Sakai Foundation is pushing, that we really want community feedback on how to make this work effectively, and we're willing to make substantial changes to how we envision the process working based on community feedback and on the results we get as projects begin to move through this process. So while I've expressed a framework for how to do this, everyone needs to know that their opinions can be incorporated, and needs to also at the same time have some patience as we work through those areas we haven't thought about and see whether they do or don't work. At the end of the day, it's going to prove itself based on results, not based on an analytical analysis of what may or may not work. So I think in a year we'll know whether the results that we're seeing as a result of this process mean it needs to continue moving forward with just minor refinements, or we need to think about a substantial change, another substantial change.
Very good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
How'd I do?
You were great.
We'll see, huh?
Go get an
Did it feel
How are you, John? Nice to see you. Having a good conference so far?